it's me again, and welcome back to the main stage. We're almost at the end of our program, and what an incredible day it has been. So uplifting and inspiring. I hope you guys are enjoying yourselves. But now we have a session I'm really excited about. It is my personal pleasure to introduce you to scientist, astronaut, changemaker, Dr. Shawna Pandya, with her talk, Reaching for the Stars, the Ultimate in Remote Medical Care. Dr. Shawna is a director of the IIAS Space Medicine Group, chief instructor for the POSSUM IIAS Operational Space Medicine course. She is a scientific astronaut candidate, physician, speaker, VP of Immersive Medicine with Luxonic Technologies, and Explorers Club Fellow. She holds 4 degrees and is completing a fellowship in wilderness medicine. Whew, that's quite some credentials. Welcome and take it away, Dr. Shawna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I hope you can all hear and see me and see my slides okay. So you've heard a little bit about my background. You've heard that I am a scientist astronaut candidate program graduate with the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences, aquanaut, explorer, skydiver, pilot in training, and so much more. But before I was any of that, I was a kid with a dream. I was tremendously inspired by these night skies that I would be witness to when I would go camping with my family and see that glittering arm of the Milky Way. And I thought to myself when I was a kid, I want to be out there. And I was a kid in the 90s, so I grew up during the second ever astronaut selection for the Canadian Space Agency, where I grew up in Canada. And I was also lucky enough to witness Dr. Roberta Bonder, the first Canadian female astronaut, go into space. And that really set me on my career trajectory because I looked at her and I said, okay, she's Canadian. I'm Canadian. She's female. I'm female. She's a girl guide. I'm a girl guide. So now all I need to do is go be a neuroscientist, physician, astronaut, and I'm set. And the craziest thing about being an adult is that your childhood dreams can surpass themselves in ways you never even dream possible as an adult with hard work, big ambitions, and a little bit of luck. And today I am a physician. I work ER, women's health. I test spacesuits in microgravity on the parabolic flight, what you may have heard of as the Vomit Comet with Project Possum in the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences. And I could tell you about how fun that is, but I would rather show you.
Cover all the tasks so that I can record it.
No rain in the back, though? Not rain in the back. Umbrella?
So, Adam, I will get the report back.
I would say that for me, the hardest. So I have to say, it's being in a spacesuit in zero G is every bit as fun as it looks. It's impossible to be in a spacesuit, weightless, and not have a giant smile on your face. We've been lucky enough to test this particular commercial spacesuit in water operations. That's what I'm doing this week. That's why my hair is wet. I just got out of the water. We've tested a different kind of spacesuit used for spacewalks with the Canadian Space Agency in a gravity offset harness, letting us offload our weight by certain amounts to simulate Martian and lunar gravity. We've run high altitude noctilucent cloud campaigns. And I've also been able to bring my own passion for space and medicine to our operational space medicine course, where we teach our course participants to be a space medical MacGyver and basically fashion splints out of the resources they have at their disposal. My journey has taken me to some pretty austere and extreme environments. So this is the Mars Desert Research Station out in the Utah desert, real life on fake Mars, although it looks like Tatooine. I earned my aquanaut designation on the 2019 Neptune aquanaut mission. So as you're quickly learning, the space and exploration worlds are full of acronyms. Neptune is no different. It stands for Nautical Experiments in Physiology, Technology, and Underwater Exploration. You'll hear a little bit more about that later this half hour. I've also been to the Aquarius Reef Base where NASA runs its NEMO or NASA Extreme Environment Mission operations, where astronauts are living and working and performing science in a laboratory on the ocean floor. I've picked up a few skills on the way, along with aquanautics, diving, rescue diving, nitrox dry suit, piloting, skydiving, and then, what perhaps more relevantly to this audience, I get to work with cool emerging technologies. So, some of my other hats include working on partial gravity rotating space stations, and perhaps most interestingly to you, working on VR, AR, and 360 video for medical and space capabilities. But I'll keep you in suspense on that front for a little bit longer. I also get to share my story with audiences such as yourselves. And this whole idea of what I ended up wanting to be as a kid really came full circle when my work was captured at the Ontario Science Centre, Canada's largest science centre, alongside Dr. Bondar. Which isn't to say I haven't learned a thing or two along the way. So I want to share with you 4 key lessons that I think will be helpful to you in your daily work. Based on my experiences in these operational environments. And so the first lesson has to do with success in failure, because it is so easy to think that we wake up like this. We have a dream, we go for it, and we go from point A to point B, and that's it, we're successful. When in reality, success looks a little bit like this. Often it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it's 3 steps forward, 5 steps back. And I want to say this loud and clear. It is okay to fail. So let me say that again. It is okay to fail. And in fact, if I would posit that if you're always winning, you're in the wrong league. And a good friend of mine, she is Canada's 7th female fighter pilot, has often said, if you're always winning, you're either lucky, lying, or Jesus himself. And so I want to really share with you another perspective on success. And it's that success isn't always pretty and success isn't always perfect. And so this is my second time doing water operations and spacesuit testing. The first time I ever did this was in 2018. And in this particular scenario, we had to simulate emergency ejection from an aircraft or spacecraft and being dropped into the ocean off our parachute harnesses. We had to start our airflow, put down our visor, deploy our portable flotation units, unleash our harness from the parachutes, swim over to emergency draft, climb up, declare ourselves home free. So simple, right? This is all we had to do. Well, as soon as I got into the water, my scenario started going sideways immediately because I took on a lot of water in my suit. And by the time I got to the raft, not only was I pulling up the weight of my body as well as a spacesuit, but I bought a spacesuit full up to my chest, full of water. And climbing up a rope ladder, this became monumentally difficult. Every single muscle in my body was screaming, begging to let go of that rope. And ultimately, I got my success. I did get into the raft. My success looked like this. And to orientate you as to what's going on, in the top right corner, you'll see a black shoe sticking in the air, and then this giant orange blob of a person that looks like a giant goldfish. That's me face down in the raft. And so success isn't always pretty, and success isn't always perfect. And part of what got me through that scenario that day was cultivating resilience. And so you may have heard of this as mental fortitude, stick-to-itiveness, grit, mental toughness. And there's actually research around cultivating resilience. It's not simply that we're born being resilient and that you're more resilient than I am, but it can actually be broken down into 5 key traits. And by applying these principles, we can make ourselves more resilient a little bit more every single day. And these 5 traits come down to breaking things down, positive self-talk, mental rehearsal, impulse control, and positive social supports. And so bringing that back to this scenario, um, every single one of those aspects of resilience came into play that day. So there was that breaking things down, not simply focusing on getting from the bottom of the ladder to the top, but focusing on the next millimeter of ground gained. There was that positive self-talk telling myself that I had this. There was the impulse control, resisting with my fingers that simply wanted to give up at that point. There was the positive social supports. My team may not have been with me in the pool that day, but they were standing around the pool telling me that I had this. And then finally, there was the mental rehearsal that if I were truly in the ocean and I chose to give up, I may as well be dead. So the other part of this is that success isn't always pretty and success isn't always perfect. And on the flip side of that, failure can be deceptively innocuous looking. So this is from a 2017 parabolic flight campaign. Earlier I called it the vomit comet. So we're just flying an aircraft, we're flying parabolas, we're falling at the same rate as the airplane, just like you are when you're over a roller coaster. And that gives us 20 to 30 seconds of zero G at a time to do science, in this case, test the spacesuit. And I'd flown before, in fact. The reason I was asked on this campaign is we were flying a brand new spacesuit, brand new company, brand new aircraft, and with so many variables, we wanted to set ourselves as up for success. And so, as one of the most experienced flyers, I was asked to fly on this campaign. But something fell off that day. And I thought, just walk it off. You have one job to do, test the spacesuit, it's fine. And we got 5 parabolas in to a 30 parabola flight before the flight test director took one look at my face, called to knock it off, aborted the scenario, pulled me out of the suit, and 5 seconds later, I threw up. And I'll spare you the mental image of what it looks like to throw up in zero G. But first of all, it's pretty gross. And second of all, if you're flying with the visor down on the spacesuit, it becomes a real asphyxiation risk. And I felt terrible. I let my teammates down. We lost lots of valuable data. And as my teammates would say, you had one job. And I didn't live up to it. And what I learned from that scenario is when we fail, you can be hard on yourself in a way that's destructive or a way that's productive. Um, and failure can be a beautiful teacher if you let it. And one of the tools that we use when we deal with failure is learning the art of the debrief. So here's a picture of the microgravity campaign war room, where we brief on every single parabolic flight campaign before we actually fly the mission. And we run through the mission objectives as a group, then we split off into our flight crews, run through the parabolas, every single motion that we're doing, every single parabola, so we know the mission parameters inside out. We do a dress rehearsal on the ground when we're suited up in a spacesuit. Then we fly the mission, and then we come back to this table and debrief, going through every single action as a group. Why do we do that? We do that to reinforce the good, where we had patterns of performance of excellence that we want to replicate for future flights. We do it to share lessons learned, so that future flight crews who come after us can also optimize their performance, and also to know what not to repeat and dissect the things that went really wrong. So failure can be a beautiful teacher if we let it. And if we're saying that success isn't always pretty and success isn't always perfect, and that failure can be deceptively innocuous looking, I hope it's becoming increasingly apparent that success and failure can be two sides of the same coin. So, the other part of it is you've heard a little bit about my background in my introduction and through what I've told you so far, but none of us would be where we are without the teams, whether you're working in developing in the 3D world, whether you're working and flying and operating in zero G. And a few key lessons I've learned about leadership and teamwork. First of all, is that leadership is like a hall of mirrors. It's not just what we preach, it's not what we say that you should and your teammates shouldn't do, but it's what we tolerate. And I've graduated from a university where the motto is uplifting the whole people. And so I interpret that to mean we're only as strong as our weakest team member. And so if we truly want to set up our teams to excel, then it takes us uplifting everyone to the point where they're in an environment where they feel compelled and will they feel comfortable performing um, in an environment where they can excel at their best, because we're not set up to succeed until our teams are set up to succeed. The other part of leadership is viewing leadership as a model of what I call mortar between the bricks. Why? When we look at a brick wall, it's so easy to think that the strength of that brick wall comes from the bricks themselves. But let's think about that for a second. Take away the mortar, take away the thing that holds that wall together. And without it, there is no strength or cohesion to that wall. And teams are no different. Leaders are the mortar between the bricks. They're the ones that build those ties and those bridges and look for gaps between teams and teammates. It's easy to think as leaders as those who lead from the front of the boardroom, but really we're the ones who are supposed to build ties. And we can't talk about leaders without talking about teammates. And so the other part of that is cultivating that team that is willing to walk through walls for you. And I have a picture of my mom with me in my spacesuit because she absolutely is one of those people who would do that. But the flip side of that is you can't ask that of your teammates unless you're willing to do the same for them. So the next lesson I want to share is the importance of paying it forward. And so every single one of us here in this audience attending this talk today, I guarantee you there is someone looking up to you, whether you realize it or not, even if you think you're just getting started. Even if you think that, I'm in my first week of my job, there's someone who, is just graduating, who wants to do what you do. You have something to offer the next generation. And I urge you to remember that, because I know I wouldn't be where I am if people who were way busier and way more successful than I was as a student took that time to invest in me. And to give you an example, in my fourth year of medical school, I was lucky enough to intern at NASA in Johnson Space Center, and I was a foreign national. I was a Canadian. I lost my passport my first day I got into my office. I was frazzled. I wouldn't be allowed onto the federal base without it. And so my phone rings in my office. I say, "Hold on for a second. I need to find my passport." And then I realized the guy had told me his name was Colonel Chris Hadfield, the guy you see in the photo. As in, he was training to be the next commander of the International Space Station. I just put him on hold. And he still found time in his schedule. It's not like he wasn't busy. He had a space station to run, to liaise with myself and the other medical student and, invest that time with us, take us for coffee, talk to us about space, talk to us about training. And that really instilled in me the value of paying it forward, because I wouldn't be where I am today if people like Chris Hatfield hadn't taken that time to invest in myself. And whether you realize it or not, someone's watching you and you're a role model for them. So pay it forward. The last lesson I want to share with you today is about pushing the limits. And so why is it important that we do that we go higher, further, faster than we did before? So I know there's a lot of technical nerds in the audience like myself today, and so I like to think about it as material stress testing. Why do we push these materials to their limits? The reason is twofold. So it's first of all to know where the limit is, and the reason is so we don't go that far the next time, or so we can take that material, reinforce it, and push even harder, stronger, more the next time. And character is exactly like that. And this fell into place for me when I was at the Mars Desert Research Station. Me and my exploration partner, we would pick the hardest, steepest, most slippery slopes, the highest slopes to climb. And the reason of why we pushed our limits fell into place for me when we scaled that summit. We pushed the limits to know what comes next. If we hadn't, we would know all of these pathways and vistas that lay to be explored. So this is a Unity conference. We are all immersed, if you'll forgive the pun, in the 3D AR immersive worlds. And I want to talk to you a little bit about my work with Luxonic now and how we're pushing the limits and the lessons learned. So I've been lucky enough to bring our immersive medical technology, the virtual radiology reading room, and a headset to the seafloor on our Aquanaut mission. So we were in the Jules Undersea Lodge. I was able to connect with the head of radiology in Canada, over 4,400 kilometers away, to discuss a simulated trauma patient. We've also brought this same suite to Zero G. It was, in fact, in the same week. It was kind of wild week. There's my teammate Heidi showing what the VR headset and virtual radiology reading room does in Zero G. Um, and then really pushing the limits. We've even brought VR and training and medical procedures to the space world. So this next video is a series of medical suites that we've developed for the Canadian Space Agency to help astronauts on long duration exploration class missions maintain those skills. Think about if you're a medical officer and the first time you learn to put an IV in is on Mars, and then the next time you're called to act upon that skill is 9 months later once you've reached the surface of Mars. You'll have lost those skills and your patient will be a pincushion. So let's have a peek at what we've developed.
Warning, 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 warning. Suit breach detected. EVA-1.
EVA-1, this is EVA-2. Come in.
Approach waypoint.
Acknowledged. EVA-1, this is EVA-2. Come in. Mike! Mike!
Retrieve patch kit.
Stay with me, buddy. It looks like you have a suit breach. I'm on it.
Secure patch. Return to base.
Oh, that was close, bud. Let's get you back to base to get you checked out.
So if you can imagine that this is space, this is the most austere, remote, resource limited environment off Earth. But if the gears in your head are turning, you may be asking yourself, there's a lot of places on Earth that aren't so different. What do the International Space Station and the Aquarius Reef Base Underwater Research Lab have in common with an Arctic medical deployment or a remote village in Kenya? And more relevantly, all of us having lived through the pandemic, what do all of those environments have in common with something that's becoming very common to all of us? The work from home quarantine isolation scenario. Because I would argue that even COVID-19 has been an austere environment of sorts, and learners, healthcare workers, students have lost access to their traditional physical learning spaces. So, what if we could push the limits on what we've developed for space and bring that benefit back to Earth? Well, we've started doing this for medical laboratory technicians, paramedics, physicians, and more. And there's no shortage of ways in which we can leverage the VR world, the AR world, 3D and more for good. And I know we all share that common hope and that common goal. And there's a lot to be done. And it all starts with a single step. Thank you so much for your attention. I look forward to taking your questions. I'm seeing some questions roll in now. So, how do I have time to work as a doctor and train? So, it's sometimes like juggling chainsaws that are on fire while walking a greased tightrope, lots of caffeine. But I think my greatest luxury and my greatest asset is my time. And so I am able to schedule my clinical work as I want, and I'm able to step away from that clinical work as I want. And so knowing that I've set up my professional life to be able to do that is probably one of my things I'm most grateful for. More questions coming in. Okay. Where do I see space and VR going in the next 5 to 10 years? Oh, I'm glad you asked that. And so when we talk about the spaceflight environment, so we have to realize a couple of things. First of all, that space is trying to kill us because of the microgravity, high radiation, high stress environment. But the other part of it is that we're constrained in what we can bring with us. So the spaceflight environment has numerous constraints when it comes to packing for space. That includes low mass, low volume, low power, low cost, easy to use, long shelf life. And so this is why I love the concept of VR for space, whether it's for training medical procedures, training on a spacewalk, because you can actually set up that 3D world without having to set up a whole lunar yard and bring that extra weight and mass with you. And VR is already being employed in, on exactly those scenarios. We're doing it for medical. It's been used for spacewalks, and it really does help build that muscle memory while reducing risk. And we know that from studies that there's greater emotional connection to the learning content, there's greater retention, there's faster learning acquisition. So I've clearly drunk the VR Kool-Aid for space. I'm hugely a fan. More questions in the last few minutes here. Okay. Is any lab working on developing a way to map the body live during surgery? I know the world of digital twins for anatomy is, there's a lot of interest in that. There's a lot of interest in helping surgeons, individualize anatomy for surgical planning. There's a few groups out there doing that. I can't recall offhand the names of those groups, but definitely, for vascular surgery, for interventional radiology, there's a group out of Seattle. If I recall the name, I'll type it in the chat. All right, a few more questions. What are the best practices for creating a sense of immersion in your virtual worlds? We have multiple senses. I think being able to leverage all of them, the sounds, the tactile feedback, that haptic feedback, obviously the rendering of that world. If you want to get really creative, bringing in the temperature control, bringing in the smell, that's a little bit added complexity, but the more you can make that reality, replicate that reality, the better off you are. And I think we have time for one more question. What are my thoughts about creating skills at the bench in VR as a scientist that can help with dexterity? Yeah, absolutely. There's a surgeon at the university I'm based at who's done exactly that, created VR simulations for surgery, then optimizing the monitoring of vital signs and biometrics, whether it's eye tracking to look at focus and how teams work together, looking at skin conductance to monitor stress levels, everything we can to optimize that will help us out. So it looks like we're out of time. Thank you so much for your attention, and please enjoy the rest of your conference and go forth and do good.